Actually, it was very funny because there is an influencer in the AI space that I follow, and he regularly posts things about AI, including their pricing, token usage. Now he posted something about a guy who invented an algorithm or a system, and you can put your prompt for Anthropic for ChatGPT for something there, and it re-engineers the prompt or doing something anyway in order to reduce the token usage. And I think that's important because there is a fight to fight the system, exactly as with LinkedIn, where we try to fight the system and the algorithm to increase our visibility. Now it's the same with token usage because the bills are getting higher and higher, and people are trying to figure out how to reduce that. This guy has figured it out, or at least he has a workaround. So I found it very, very interesting.
Yeah, I was talking to someone at a kind of outside party, like what was it? Like a summer party at my wife's workplace, and he's a very, very technical guy. And we're saying the problem is that people realize the cost of AI now, the cost of tokens, which has kind of been brought in a kind of press gang kind of way where no one's really been that consulted on the buyer side as much. It's just this is what you're going to pay. And we were saying that I was saying to him as a joke because we were both drinking, saying that you should be this token master. So I was trying to make it sound fun. Like you should be like Game of Thrones token master, where every token has to come through you because that's going to be the control point. And we were talking about jobs of the future and where that control point will be. And I was saying, I'm making up, obviously, because we are drinking alcohol. But I believe there's going to be a control point where we all go through this person and the query goes through this person. That person is smart enough to say, well, actually, I'm going to either automate that query and break it down, or I'm going to tell you how many tokens you're allowed to do or what model you're allowed to do and when you're allowed to do it. And it obviously I was drinking, so it might have been a bit drunk, but I was saying that is already needed as a role in most organizations, and they do it in a kind of cowboy way of saying, well, George, here's $1,500, Gary, here's 1,000. I've heard people had 500 as well. And so they're already allocating in finance. You get 1,500, you get 2.5 grand, you get 10 grand, you get £5 or £5 or £20 a month. So I think they're already doing it, but they haven't done it as well as the way you articulated, which is a kind of algorithmic way of doing it.
I think it's fight for scarce resources as before. We had, I don't know, gold, we had oil, salt, perhaps.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, you think about it. And before 10 years or so, we said that data is the new oil. And now it's compute time. And this is the major restriction. And we are fighting for compute time and the cost associated with it. And obviously, you need gatekeepers because you need to guard your gold somehow. And gatekeepers could be an automated system like this guy invented and this influencer posted today. But it could be an actual person doing manual job and checking different roles, different.
Hello, George.
At each and every day.
Yeah.
So this is what I think, that we will see these gatekeepers coming as an additional job description in this market.
Totally needed. I think it's it's needed now, and it's done in a kind of half-assed way because they had to do it because of the cost it ballooned. And I went to a conference just 2 weeks ago, and I met someone from, I think it was someone from Zapier, and she basically just explained how they had used a bit more tokens than they were supposed to in the early days, and now they have a budget. I can't remember what her budget was. Maybe it's $1,500 or whatever. And now they have a budget. And after that budget's finished, then you can reapply or try to cross-share. But as you were saying earlier before we went on record, that some companies don't allow you to cross-share or pool. And I've seen a really good article. I think it was Stephen Forth or could be Ed Arnold. And it went into extreme detail about wallet infrastructure and credit sharing. It was almost like a banking paper, and I found it really good. But it was super heavy. It was almost like saying, well, what if George wanted to recreate a banking system, but the currency was tokens? How would you do it? How would you run a central bank of tokens in the individual firm? How would you then allocate the tokens around? Because yeah, okay, George used too many this month, but Gary's got some left. And how do we cross share? How do we get the legal agreements out in place that allow George and Gary kind of on the same team to cross share, because George is doing some forward development work and Gary's doing, I don't know, RTB, BAU. And so I thought, wow, this is really intense. I wonder how many people actually read it, but it's a real like economics plus econometrics plus tokenomics. I thought, wow, this is detailed. So, so
If you think about it, it's business as usual.
yeah.
With one trap, with one additional element, but it's business as usual. For anything which is important, you need to budget for that. So obviously now companies are doing their budget and they include some ChatGPT, Anthropic, whatever tool they're using, token-based charges. The key problem still is predictability. So yes, they have included a budget, but they can still get surprised, as it happened with Uber, for instance, where they exceeded their full year budget within, I think, a couple of months or something like that.
Yeah.
And the rumored $500 million charge, it's rumored have been Amazon, but we really don't know for sure. But anyway, a big company was charged $500 million in just a month or so of usage because they allowed everyone in the company to use these tools. I think they were using Anthropic, by the way. So it's not just budgeting. Yes, you can and you should do that, but are you able right now to predict? And second, even if you can predict, is the usage that corresponds to this budget sufficient enough to do whatever you want? Because with Claude, perhaps it's not, because it's more restrictive, but with ChatGPT, perhaps it is because it's looser and more friendly and more open and has less restrictions. Obviously, this has many repercussions for the supply side. So Anthropic has better financials because of that, because it monetizes a lot based on premium prices and restrictions. ChatGPT is not like that financially. And although it started first and earlier and it has the biggest market share, still its finances and its total revenue, it's less than Anthropic. Obviously, this reflects the different monetization model, a different objective, penetration in OpenAI's case, and monetization and skimming and prices, increased prices in Claude's and Anthropic's case. We'll see lots of things like that, and many of predictions that we need to make under uncertainty, at least still.
Yeah, so you said a few things there, George. And I wonder how many of those things were verbalized in the firm. So, just by looking at the firms initially, they were running a penetration process. And then you said most probably at this point, Claude with the Fable, which closed down, and the 4.8 are running, and then the 2x times at speed is running basically a skimming model. Now, you're on the outside looking in and saying, "No, this is just obvious. This is just like water and wine. It's obvious." I wonder how many of those words that you used were verbalized and then rubber stamped. We, as a firm, agree to run a penetration pricing strategy from, I'll just make it up, February 2023 to August 2026. Bang. We will revisit it, basically S1, IPO. We at Claude run a penetration process, and this process, then we're going to run a skimming process from, I think they've really ramped up for the last 6 months, from January 2026. We are going to skim until IPO in October. What you said there is brilliant, but also scary, because I don't think, and I could be wrong here, I want to, hopefully they come forward, that they've actually rubber stamped what you've said is the obvious, and I think is the obvious. That it's almost happened by osmosis and just, oh, we're just going to do this.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think they partly realize their monetization strategies and objectives, that they are different. talking obviously about the key players, OpenAI and Anthropic, I think that OpenAI is more like Google, more successful right now than Google in the AI space. But anyway, it's more like Google because they want to build a big ecosystem with even free users, and that's okay for their model because eventually they want to monetize with advertising and so on and so forth. And we know what has happened in the past few months. OpenAI just launched a couple of low-paid or non-paid schemes and plans with advertising on top. And Anthropic stated specifically that they won't be involved in any advertising of any kind and so on and so forth. So these are two completely different objectives and strategies, and I'm pretty sure that the companies fully realize what they are doing. Anthropic is more like Apple. They want to target higher income customers, possibly enterprise customers in the case of Anthropic, and with bigger pockets, bigger budgets, not necessarily $500 million, obviously, but millions or thousands, or at least something bigger than the average individual user casually using for day-to-day purposes, perhaps not work-related individual user. So I think that at least partly they understand, but also there is some kind of osmosis and direction that was created by the market. They happen to capture a part of the market, especially for OpenAI, because they were the first to occupy this market. They captured the biggest part. They had the biggest market share, so they want to capitalize on that. On the other hand, Anthropic needed to differentiate itself. So it's going to do exactly the same. They need to pivot and differentiate somehow. They did it how? By creating a niche, the enterprise market, the higher income market, and offering something better, but more expensive, more premium price. So this is more or less, this is why I said it's yes and no.
Yeah, so this is a good subject because we can argue about this, because I'm kind of saying, agreeing with you, but saying that essentially, whether it be yourself or Stephen, or it could be Ed, it could be Rob, they're all trying to create conscious pricing strategy. You're awake, you've sat around, you've done the research, maybe done some quants if you need to, done some math if you don't need to, you've done some qualitative, some quantitative, and you've made a conscious decision that this is a monetization strategy for your firm. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, but it's conscious and it's also written in blood, for even if it's only you review it every month. That's a conscious monetization decision. Now, my supposition is they've made an unconscious monetization decision, which is, oh, what is the best? We're just going to price it higher. As opposed to the structural way which you would make it, which is then you would test how much more are we going to charge than anybody else. Am I going to apply the Apple? Am I going to apply the Palantir skimming strategy? Which one am I going to apply? And so structurally conscious would be, yes, we are going to do that. And then, yeah, we may need to do some more work, and it's worth 15, 20, 35, 50 grand in spending consultancy to really nail this Apple strategy. I'm saying that most of the AI companies have been doing an unconscious, and most SaaS firms, unconscious pricing strategy. And the point now with SaaS isn't that I think SaaS is still brilliant tools, because to me it was SOPs, like standard operating procedures. But now they're being forced to make conscious pricing decisions, and they're in a kind of a fog of, I've never made any conscious pricing decisions. I've always just priced like that because he or she did that. And I think I see that tension of, when I speak to people, is now you have to make a conscious decision, speak to a George, speak to a Stephen, speak to an Ed, speak to a Rob, and now make a conscious decision. And I see a bit of anxiety when they have to make a decision like that.
On that, I fully agree. What I meant is that they consciously, at least partly consciously, identify the right target audience, market, and if they should focus on penetration, higher adoption rates, or just skimming the market and higher prices. But these are directional things. Regarding the exact prices, the exact plans, and so on and so forth, I think it's a matter of experimentation, qualitative work. I'm not sure if they have done any pricing research or applied any of the popular and well-established pricing methodologies, perhaps partly, but not fully. I remind you and everyone of the famous quote from Sam Altman when he introduced the highest paid pro plan of 200 euros back then. Now it's $200 down to 100. And he said that it looked fine. They presented that to me and I make a decision. And that was all there is. For a big company like this, obviously it looks ridiculous, but this is how it happens, especially at the beginning when you don't have a lot of data. So, okay.
Totally.
But now, because they are big, they're making tens of billions, each of these big companies, obviously they cannot afford to do it this way. And possibly they are still making specific, detailed decisions, not just directional decisions, without quantifying a lot, without applying market research, pricing research, methodologies, and all these things, which is regrettable, obviously, because they are missing a lot. But I think it's not their top priority right now. It's building a specific ecosystem, a specific market, and creating a lot of visibility and dominating their firms for their IPOs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I agree with that totally. That it hasn't been top of mind, and I've still been every week. I have a look and say how many pricing people do they have on their team, and I listened to a podcast. I think it's called Top Line, and they're recruiters in the kind of GTM space, really top recruiters. And they were saying that a lot of Salesforce staff have gone to OpenAI. Well, having been bought by OpenAI. So you're like, okay, so you've got Sam Altman saying that we're going to get rid of all jobs and obviously get rid of the Salesforces and the HubSpots and that, because we don't need that. We've got super intelligence. But then the very same person is hiring one of the best people from Salesforce, which is kind of like a little bit of an oxymoron. But what I kind of took away from last week, to go from a complete non-sequitur, last week kind of told me that this is now a big issue, because everybody else was like moaning about the Fable being stopped by the US government. And I was saying to my cousin earlier, it's interesting, yeah, from a product and like free speech and that's interesting, but there's no such thing as free speech. But what is interesting from pricing, George, is that now we have the top end of the market. Before we didn't know, well, what's the iPhone, what was a good iPhone 11 going to be priced at? Now we know the top end of the market. Because in reality, what the government done, in my mind, being a conspiracy theorist, is that the government have now said, George, this is the best model you'll be able to produce. Only this. Anything above that is going to need some sort of like crazy controls, export controls, import controls, some other control. So now we've given George the top end of his product market. He cannot go higher than that, because any higher than that is going to somehow involve political interference. So as a result, we now have the best iPhone ever. So therefore, that's a top price. And therefore, all the other prices now are relative to that price, because that price was going higher and higher, and $50 per million tokens. There is no higher price. The highest price is now going to be the $25, maybe 2x, whatever, for speed, because there is no $50, because it's never going to be allowed.
Yes and no. Again, why? I do agree.
I want an argument. Yeah, I want to discuss the point. It's supposed to be aggressive. Go on.
Well, actually, it's not aggressive. It's a different angle, because what they have done right now, they have neutralized the upper level pricing plans part. So what you see in OpenAI, in Anthropic, and other companies, more or less is the same. Not exactly the same, but within a radius of 15% or something like that, their prices are almost the same. But there is a hidden layer, which is usage, again, which is completely different. I mean, the usage, I don't have a clue exactly what the usage of OpenAI versus Anthropic is, their limitations, but by using both tools, I understand that it's something in the area of 1 to 10, 1 to 20, something like that. So if I get 20 times more usage with OpenAI with the same price, practically it costs 1/20 of the price of, or 1/10 or like that of the price of Claude. but you can directly compare them. So you think they're almost the same and follow each other, but they don't actually follow each other. And I think this is what is going to happen. They are going, both companies and other AI companies as well, they're going to invent metrics, users, most likely metrics, that are going to differentiate the pricing and don't change and fight a lot or whatever is at first glimpse visible to all customers. Which will make it very difficult for us to actually understand exactly what is happening with their pricing until we actually start using the system.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was trying to get to the root of the real problem, and I was using ChatGPT, and I used Claude and ChatGPT at the same time. I paid for both, and I was saying, how would you, if someone came to this new, how would you describe the real problem? You can say it's a pricing problem, but it's kind of too high up. Monetization problem, yeah. Is it a product problem? But with my discussion with AI, which is interesting, it said AI really had a measurement problem. And you're like, actually, yeah, I've heard of R. And then we kept on conversing or whatever with the chatbot. And it's saying, well, because nothing's measurable, you can't put, there can be no ROI, because there must be an ROI now, but it could be negative or positive, but you can't actually get your hands on it. And then I said, oh, like, you mean like Google measurement? And it said, yeah, Google's a good example, because, and I'm obsessed by Google, which no one else is. Google literally made up a measurement. I'm going to basically, how many keystrokes did George do? How many clicks did he do? How many eyeballs? And then we've obviously Meta took it one step forward. How many people like a picture of George? How many people like a picture? So it's insane, the measurements, because they mean nothing. But we now think they mean something. We think, even I'm that cynical, think followers mean something on LinkedIn. It means nothing. But they're just made up measurements. And then we track based on those measurements. Facebook is a good example, but the video downloads, now Spotify downloads, again, they're meaningless. What's the impact? What's the value? No, who knows? But, and so my point, unless AI is able to come up with a proper measurement that is a little bit Mickey Mouse, let's be fair, because all the ones in social media are, let's be fair, and marketing, performance marketing are just made up. But it has to be intuitive to someone. And it can't be MLLU or what, that crazy one, or SWE bench, that other crazy one. No one cares about that, because that doesn't mean anything to anybody. And I think if it's able to do that, George, and then you get two competing one, yeah, maybe we can understand, because as you say, you're a very heavy mathematical guy, and you will struggle to work out the cost base of 15 employees using the full rank of Claude freely. It'd be a wild variation. You'd have to run a Monte Carlo simulation or something, which you could do, but most people couldn't.
Yeah, I think that as the enabling technology, AI in this case, it was software before years and so forth, or SaaS technologies before a couple of decades. As the enabling technology matures, the product differentiation gets less significant as we go. Now you have multiple different tools out there, and more or less they are alike. Some tools are better in this area, some in the other area, but it's not like some tools are at 0 and the other at 100%. And they are quite distinguishable from one another. They are very close to one another. And there is competition, so they evolve and so forth. And as it happened in previous years with different technologies back then, we have the same thing now. People and companies that try to differentiate how? By creating markets. And part of the market creation is creating the right monetization scheme, which needs obviously the right metrics and the right measurement and so on and so forth. This is what Google did with advertising. And it was a great scheme, a great strategy. It worked fine. Now they're making billions, hundreds of billions, and they are admired and so on and so forth. That started well below Microsoft back then with a different SaaS and cloud-oriented strategy. Microsoft didn't follow, at least for some time, and obviously they lost a lot. And now we know what happened. Google is a giant, as is Microsoft, of course. When they followed Google's strategy, by the way, with Azure and so on and so forth. I think it's the same right now. Anthropic is great, but also OpenAI is great, and Google, Gemini, they are great. They have variances of greatness, but they are all great tools.
Yes,
And they need to differentiate with penetrating specific markets and monetizing by measuring the right things. If the right thing is, by the way, token or not, it remains to be seen, because so far it has many, many problems. It doesn't relate directly with value. Exactly as you said, even the pay-per-click for Google advertising is not the actual final outcome that I expect, which is for them to buy my product. So there is a conversion, which is a heavy stage, and this is left out of the monetization stage because it can be measured. And it's dependent on my efforts and not just Google's. The same exactly here. If they are convinced, they will convince us or not to follow this token-based measurement system or not, it remains to be seen, and I think it's very, very difficult to achieve it, especially with high prices, because they are starting with high prices. I'm talking about Anthropic, not about OpenAI.
So I agree 100%. I totally agree with that. And in a sense that if you think about work, there is so much work that people do in an office that actually to cover the breadth of that work means you're going to always have pricing problems. Because if I look at some of the most valuable work done, rightly or wrongly, it's a PowerPoint that goes to some senior committee. It could be a board, it could be exec committee or something. Those are valuable because they're seen by the right eyeballs, and that's it. It's the storytelling to the right people. Those are always valuable. And that person that produces those is always seen as valuable. It could be investor relations guy or girl, it could be FP&A, it could be whoever. And so similarly, a pitch deck is obviously valuable because it's going to VCs. And the 1 in, 100 chance of getting funded at a few billion. So I think the inability to be specific and mean that we have to then basically take it, the raw material, and mold it into something. And I think that's part of why they're not able to monetize as well, because certain tasks have certain value. And if they could produce a good PowerPoint, then great. But I would produce PowerPoints for startups. They're more valuable than PowerPoints for even execs. And it would be exec committees, then it would be like, I don't know, levels down. And because they're not that specific, they're too reliant on the user creating value, which Salesforce was, but not to that degree. You could create value out of Salesforce by just importing a table of clients. And it already had value. And it had value to the firm because now George cannot leave, because now we have his black book, essentially what would have been a black written book before of contacts. And similarly now, we can predict how much he's going to earn and pay him on that kind of revenue basis. So immediately you use Salesforce, even though it's crazy complicated, it had value. AI has struggled to do that out of the box.
I think, again, it's nothing that we see in AI is a unique problem with AI. It's a problem or a set of problems that we've seen with other technologies in the past. Right now, with AI, the key challenge in pricing and monetization is what? Passing from the traditional SaaS subscription economy, which was time and duration and seat-based, which was very far away from the outcome and the final value of the customer. Then we go into token-based, which practically is what? Job done, task done based outcomes. But still, this is, first of all, hard to predict, okay, but even if you predict it and eventually you get the job done, is a job done? It's like creating a PowerPoint. If I'm generating a PowerPoint or a report or, I don't know, doing things within a system or for presenting, but the end result is selling, increasing volume, increasing profits, convincing my board with a presentation to do something important. This something important is the actual value that I get out of this tool, out of this presentation, eventually this tool. But the problem with real outcome-based pricing, where the pricing is really related to the actual outcome and value, profitability, and so on and so forth, the problem is how to measure it, and also how to measure your contribution, the supplier side, versus the customer's contribution.
Yeah.
If I didn't make this deal, I didn't convince my board, Was the problem the PowerPoint delivered by the system or me? Because I didn't deliver as I should. Or perhaps the company, because they didn't understand the opportunity as they should, and so on and so forth. So why should my pricing and the vendor be penalized because someone within the company didn't do their work and their job as they should have? This is a universal problem for outcome-based pricing. This is why we rarely see true outcome-based pricing. So bottom line, I think still we will see for AI tools a combination, a hybrid system of subscription-based, partly plus some on-the-go, as we go payments and token-based pricing. But what is the right measurement, first of all, and what is the acceptable consumption and the price of this consumption? It remains to be seen, and there is a lot of debate and a lot of experimentation to happen in the market. We're still in the beginning.
You come on to outcome-based pricing, yeah. That's a good point. Because I was looking at the Salesforce purchase of basically Intercom Fin last week, and obviously trying to think of an alternative interesting LinkedIn angle, and going round and round the house, and I thought, this makes no sense, George. So imagine you run a massive consultancy, and then I run a really small one, and you have people capable of doing what I do with the same amount of background, but you would rather buy my consultancy. It doesn't on the surface make sense. And then kept on reading about kind of the DNA of Salesforce. I went back to the history, who were the first 5 people, like Benny Half and this person, that person, and their backgrounds. And I compared it to the background of, say, Intercom. And Intercom were literally, I think there's 4 engineers and like a half engineer. Someone who did like half or whatever, half business and engineering. So like, well, that's pretty engineering. And then Salesforce is a mixture of Mark Benioff did a bit of engineering, and you had a bit of human social study. Then you had a bit of marketing. You had a mixture, like a normal mixture you'd find in a corporate firm. And already Salesforce have a really good customer service tool, or a good customer service tool. Already they've tried outcome-based pricing with Agentforce. Why would they need to spend billions buying another company who does that, who's been a bit more successful doing it? And I think it's only because they were unable to tell their current staff that they need to change their DNA that drastically to actually really do Agentforce properly. Because there's no other rational reason. They've done Agentforce, they've done Einstein, they've done all sorts of stuff which says, yeah, we've got enough good people here. And Salesforce has some very good people. I think they just couldn't fix the DNA quickly enough on the outcome-based pricing, and thought, you know what, it's $4 billion, who cares? We might as well spend it now for a quick shout at what George is saying, of at least one minor segment of the market and customer service that can do outcome-based pricing.
Why did Meta bought Instagram back then for billions? And we debated that back then, but it was all about engagement, about a new angle and point of view in the market that Meta, although it was a relatively young company, but still it was very difficult to change its DNA, so they needed to integrate something like Instagram. Now I heard that Elon Musk also bought Cursor in order to fight Anthropic, what they are doing with code creation, so forth. Survivor for Cursor, by the way, but also a big step for Elon Musk. Why did they do that? And they don't develop the same tools themselves? Because they can't. Because it's very difficult when you are in a big company, even a young company. If it is a very, very big company, it needs to have structure. And structure is great, but it creates less flexible organizations. So in this case, sometimes it's better to acquire someone who's more flexible, has created something in more depth in the area that you want to invest, and integrate it partly. So this is how big organizations usually get bigger and bigger with acquisitions. Smaller ones through organic growth and so on and so forth. That's a different scheme, and it's fully understood. SAP failed this way. when they try to create their own CRM system, BI system, whatever system for everything apart from the accounting core that they have, and still they are considered great in accounting, nothing else. Everything else has failed. They have some small market share, but nothing else because they couldn't change their DNA. It's still considered a great accounting software, a great ERP, nothing else.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I used SAP for quite a while, so I know what you mean there. So kind of all the purchases, whether it be the meter purchase, etc., by Stripe, all of them prompted a question of, can traditional SaaS companies, even if there are 15 pricing guys and girls out there from Caroline and Claire, etc., and you and Ed, all telling them logically what's correct, can they actually implement it? Not physically, not technology-wise, because that's possible also, but have they got the mental capacity to essentially radically change what has been a 25-year paradigm? And that's kind of where I'm kind of doing a lot of research saying, what if everybody on LinkedIn is actually correct and you have enough research and you actually have the time to read Stephen Forth in-depth credit-based write-ups, which are really good, but they're insanely like 45 minutes. All of the information is already there. They could read you, they could read Stephen, they could read Rob, they can listen to his videos. What if all the information is already there? Exactly what you should experiment with. I know it's going to work, but experiment with. But the inertia is still lacking, George.
They don't know where to start. That's the main problem.
No,
that's the main issue, nothing else. If you see the statistics, and we have discussed about that in other podcasts, the average pricing team is one person per 2,000 employees. So even OpenAI, I'm not sure if they have reached already 2,000 employees. So this is why more or less right now they're starting to hire, perhaps ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Actually, it should have been something like every 200 or 300 people or 400 people, you should have at least one pricing person because it's too important to leave it just hanging there and perhaps spread around marketing and other departments. That's the main problem. And because they don't have dedicated pricing resources, so they really don't have a clue about pricing. And they really can't even evaluate a pricing solution, pricing software, a pricing expert, because they don't know how to start. They don't know how to evaluate. They really don't know anything about it. If you go to other fields, like marketing, for instance, even small companies, they have at least a few marketing professionals or sales professionals. So they have the commercial expertise to start hiring consultants or using software and so on and so forth. They can do things. That can do things within the organization. That's the main problem. So the only solution is to change their mindset. But in order to change their mindset, you need easy entry points. Pricing software is not an easy entry point, for instance, because it takes a lot. It's a major distraction. You go to a small company, to a mid-sized company, and say, hey guys, in order to improve your pricing, you need to implement whatever pricing solution. They will say no, because we really don't understand pricing, first of all, and you need us to disrupt the enterprise with IT due diligence, blah, blah, blah. We'll never do it. For most companies, you need a simple entry point, which is AI-based analysis, which can be done once per year, but from external consultants, or external consultants and expertise to help them build basic things, knowledge, resources, governance within the company. They need basic stuff. So they need to be a bit more open-minded. That's the problem or the challenge from the company side. And from the supplier side, to be more light in their offerings. Understanding that most of the companies have basic needs and basic understanding of pricing. There is a mismatch right now in the market, I think. That's why 95% of the market is underserved or not served at all pricing-wise.
Yeah, a good point. Yeah, definitely. You could definitely survive, I think, in the old model with that. I don't think you can survive in the new model with that. So I have a thesis, which no one necessarily agrees with, which is okay, after all the drama and the market crashes and we have all that bailout or non-bailout, we are going to have a token-based economy, whether we like it or not. Maybe not with top-end models, maybe with cheap Chinese models, maybe with mid-tier models. Whatever happens, we're going to have somehow, either in the first or second derivative, it's going to be based on token and usage. So that basically completely reorientates, whether it be in my old job in finance or marketing, definitely HR, everything around a different metric, which is the meter. And the token, people call it credit if you want to abstract it, but it's really raw product is the token. And therefore, the old model of being kind of unconsciously just not really knowing where to start with pricing, I think the token's giving you an entry point. It's saying this is how much your tokens cost. If you can work that out, then you're going to have a start to say, well, actually, well, what am I transforming these raw tokens from? And what is that transformation worth into the output, which hopefully someone values? And I see if they look at it in that way, before we didn't have to worry about calculating the cost as much. It was easy. It was X times Y. Or even if it was the cloud, it was still simple-ish. Number of computes, number of different instances. I think now tokens are forcing people to basically do a lot more calculations and understand the value more, because they're going to know that raw input costs this much, my transformation is this, and therefore my selling is that.
I couldn't agree more with what you said, especially about your statement that old-fashioned, old-school pricing-wise SaaS or AI companies cannot survive in this new market. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, and you mentioned it before a minute or so, that the cost, the variable cost back then was trivial, non-existent, or something like 5%, 10% at most, so nothing important. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't waste time calculating costs and perhaps have a cost plus approach, because it was all about a willingness to pay and all these things. But now they cannot afford to do that, because on average, compute time, especially for AI-based companies, could take away 15, 20% out of your profitability easily. So cost is important.
Yeah.
And there is scarcity, there is availability. All these are issues that weren't before, back then, when we had only SaaS companies with unlimited availability. It was all about the deal that you will make with the customer. It was all about the demand side and not so much about the supply side. Now it's the other way around. So definitely you need to think very, very differently about your pricing. Definitely it's a matter of survival, by the way, and not just a luxury of increasing profitability. It's, do I make profits or not? Can I survive or not? Will I get bankrupt or not? So it's extremely important, and you need to be very, very sophisticated about your pricing and experimenting with your monetization logic and scheme. The first important step is to realize that. Once you realize that pricing and monetization is a market of survival for you and not just improving your finances, that's the great first step to take. Then you need to evaluate your internal resources, if you have enough or not. Perhaps you do. Who knows? In most cases, I think they won't have enough resources, but they will have at least the right mental capacity and direction and mindset to understand that they need to hire some external help. And then start building and identifying what's the best monetization scheme. The technology part is important, but it's nothing else than an enabler anymore. The monetization is the most important thing that will distinguish the losers from followers and from real winners in the market. This stands for small AI companies, but also for big ones, like Anthropic and OpenAI. But I think they're starting to realize that, the bigger one.
Hopefully you're right. Okay, mate, that was a good podcast. Okay, so that's getting there. That was very good. That was about 44 minutes. I'll just relax. So I'll show you how it recorded. I will download it into Veed, mess about a bit. So it wasn't bad. I'll look in your diary again for next week for a very, and we will try and keep the session like 2 times 12 minutes. You bring a topic up.
Whatever you like. I mean,
Yeah, that
I'm
was
open
good.
and
It was good. That was good. And you got good feedback from your post, actually. Yeah, you got very good feedback on your LinkedIn from your post about tokens.
yes, it was nice. It was nice. Not
Yeah.
so much traction as I was expecting, but I had a break of more than 2 weeks where I didn't post anything because I was away and then I didn't have time. So, the LinkedIn algorithm penalizes you a bit if you're not consistent, and I wasn't at all.
Yeah.
But I think it was nice. Yes, it was good.
It was good.
Let's
So
see how
yeah,
it
so
goes.
for the last couple of days, particularly, I've been obsessed by thinking of measurements, and I haven't thought of one yet. But I think that's part of the game. Measurements. What are we measuring? And I listened to these guys were talking about the same podcast, Top Line guys, and they were saying that in banking we used to have this thing called SOPs, George, and SOPs are standard operating procedures, and they're of what we discussed earlier. Gary is going on holiday. He runs let's just make it up. He runs a product library. It would be a valuation library. That means he has to download all the derivative trades. He has to put them into a spreadsheet. He has to basically download another column, add this, say it's a number of steps. So then he uploads it. Then we run against a quant library. Then we run it against the market, updated at 4 o'clock. And there's our valuation for derivatives. That's that kind of thing. And we would write these insanely detailed processes, which always would miss something. And you'd find out what's missing when that person goes. And then when we tried to ship it over to India, then obviously we realized there were gaps in the process. The number of SOP processes in terms of steps is in the 30s. Step 1, open a spreadsheet. Step 2, download this. Step 3, log into Bloomberg. Step 4, HTML and down it, whatever, price PX. So there's 30. At the low end, it's 13. At the top end, there's like crazy, like 80. So they were saying that the best AI models can only handle 15 steps with efficacy of about 35%. So if I gave the SOP, the basic one, to a top-end model, it could expect to basically execute it exactly perfectly based on what I would do 1 out of every 3 times only.
That's very sad. I didn't know that. I mean, that's a big limitation.
Yeah, because multi-step, you're better at maths than me. You know how much, if just a bit of drift in each step, by the time you got to step 15, you're in a world of pain. So they said no. Even the people who run the model say no, it doesn't handle that many steps. It's really a 3 to 5 step process, which coding is normally quite flat. But if you've got multiple like human processes, insane processes, log into this, download that, get the price from Jimmy, then open that spreadsheet, do SQL this. Nah, it can't do that with any sort of good efficacy.
That's a great opportunity and a gap in the market for someone to develop a specialized workflow tool or SOP.
There you go.
Something
A
like that.
A product with a price.
The pricing committee, velvet rope cartel, turning every checkout into Dante's 7th hell. Can we simplify? Gets treated like a crime, cause complexity looks smart when you present it in a slide. Every metric looking healthy till the profit disappear, like magic trick performed by venture capitalists of the year. Net retention floating high like a helium parade till the AWS invoice enters with a switchblade.